Sfath's predictions. From Contact Report 896.
That is the case. But now I have something unpleasant to tell you. Namely, that I am to convey to you on behalf of the committee that I should urgently bring up all of this again in our current conversation. That it is to look through Sfath's annals and check what Sfath wrote down and conveyed to you on Sunday, the 5th of May, 1946, in a predictive manner. The committee explains that this is urgently necessary and should be announced again because what you have published does not correspond to everything that is listed in the annals. On behalf of the committee, I have to inform you that Sfath's annals were checked with the issue of the conversation report, which contains Sfath's conversation of the 5th of May, 1946, among other things. As has now been determined during this check, unfortunately, the content does not match the records in the annals because very important parts of the conversation are missing, but also because enormous falsifications have been introduced. Many of the statements in the annals that you published were removed and falsified by the energies that maliciously harmed you, which apparently happened in the same manner much earlier than you perceived. Now it is required, as the committee orders, that the complete conversation report be reproduced and published again, according to the annals effectively produced by Sfath. Consequently, care must be taken to ensure that there are no more missing statements and falsifications, and that everything, or rather the whole of the Sfath annals, is complete, so that everything is checked carefully. This is to be done by you and Bernadette. Then you are to attach these predictions to this conversation report, which the committee will transfer directly to your computer because it is to be assumed that the original is no longer available to you. I think that you did not notice the unnoticed removal of entire blocks of text, as well as the inserted falsifications, which is why you should once again quote Sfath's words, as they were originally said by him, although this time you should check carefully to see if anything is missing or falsified again.
So I already have a copy of the whole thing on the computer, and can I add it to this conversation as such?
That is so, and it is probably only possible to attach the report to our conversation.
Wait a moment while I check the computer. Yes, here it is indeed. Should I just add it here to our conversation?
That is probably how it should be, and I think that you will want to read it and correct it, because it is a copy of your retrieval work that has not yet been corrected for typing errors, as I heard from the instructions of the committee and have not yet read it myself. But it will be necessary for you to check it, because the committee explained that the transmission may also cause displacements of words, as well as of the page format, because earthly technology is still very prone to malfunction. So you will have to read it later on and correct the mistakes.
That is right, because the whole thing is quite long and detailed. But I will read it later and see what needs to be corrected in terms of the format and the words, and then Bernadette will make the final corrections and we will publish it. Of course, we will be very careful to make sure that this time all of Sfath's statements are included and that there are no distortions.
That probably cannot be changed, I guess.
So be it. So I will insert it here, although I do not think that the previous 8 sentences of the conversation are necessary to copy as well, are they?
You can omit that. So you only have to copy the direct statements of Sfath. But everything in the conversation regarding the spelling mistakes still needs to be corrected, because it is about what you retrieved and wrote down, and from which everything had already been changed and removed when you passed it on for correction.
I also think so. Then when I retrieve our conversation, Sfath's predictions are inserted here.
Note: the following prediction by Sfath was taken from his annals in the original copy, which is why his spelling has been adopted unchanged and should be retained as it is, even if it does not correspond to today's spelling and grammar. Sfath, 5th May 46.
As in the last years, I also have to familiarize you today with many facts, which you can understand very well and will always consciously have to cope with and process, but which will only be possible for you because, through my intervention in your development of consciousness in relation to your reason and your mind. You have already developed many times more than would normally be the case for an Earth boy your age, let alone for an Earth human 4 times older than you. Good. There is also something to be said about the first and all the other conversations you have had regarding the explanation of your tasks and mission, namely that I will bring up the same facts several times and at different times. But what is important is that, through the repetition method, you are able to recall the details of everything that is of important significance for you and your task and mission from my explanations, and everything you have learned and continue to learn, by interestingly recalling the details through the repetition method. This also includes knowledge that will only interest you in later decades, especially when you first set out into the world on your own, only to finally return to Switzerland from your travels, work and adventures in foreign countries many years later. However, I will only tell you a few things about this now in relation to your first departure, but more about that later. First of all, you will leave your home and live in Istanbul on the Bosporus in Turkey for a short time, working as a tourist guide in the bazaar. Then you will go to Jordan for a longer period of time, although this state has yet to be founded and will be established this month. There you will be a guest of a prince and his family in the capital and also act as an intermediary for the king, going in and out of the royal palace. At the same time, you will learn the craft of marble working in a marble factory in Amman, and then some of the art of jewelry making in the city of Jerusalem. After that, you will live in Bethlehem for a short time, where you can work as a tourist Corinthian, after which you will go on to Israel, which, however, will only be founded in the near future, namely in 2 years' time. But in the second decade of the new millennium, it will wage a murderous war against Palestine, controlled by a mad leader who is both morally bankrupt and criminally driven by a desire for genocide, and as a result of which, a renewed and evil hostility towards Jews and racial hatred will be created and provoked. This hostility also already existed in Hitler's Third Reich, and will therefore be rekindled. But this hatred will also arise again in the first decades of the new millennium through the Hermandad in the state of Germany, because the police will make everything a routine and will no longer adapt their duties to the corresponding situations. This also increasingly leads to a situation in Switzerland and in all countries around the earth that all the thoughts of revenge and thoughts of retaliation of many human beings, who learn nothing in this regard, that all life of any genus and species, however it is characterized in terms of action and behavior, should be protected. But, from the depths of their evil character, the unrighteous are increasingly demanding death for other human beings, because these fellow human beings, any of them, have done something wrong. It may only be a small wrong, but it is enough for all those evil sociopaths with a twisted character to want the death of criminals without thinking if they have done something wrong or even committed murder. However, all those who are somehow wanted to be arrested and sentenced to death because they themselves have done something wrong will then whine, and for them mercy shall prevail over justice. And this will become even more pronounced in the future when, in 1949, an evil military organization is founded in America that will spread internationally and then operate worldwide throughout the earth, waging war, murder, and destruction under the guise of maintaining and creating peace. This will lead to what I have already mentioned in relation to the killing of criminals, because many Earth humans will become so depraved in character that they will lose all sense of humanity and righteousness and become addicted to revenge. America will unintentionally reveal, through the founding of this organization, also its terrible lust for world domination, as well as its pathological and insane delusion, which it has been pursuing since ancient times, of wanting to be the world's police force. As a result, America, or rather its leaders, and all those of the people who agree with them, will become a worldwide evil, and America will thus become the most criminal state of all evil on earth. But now on to what will happen in relation to your first departure from your homeland, which will be followed by a long absence. So, you will leave Bethlehem for Baghdad in Iraq, in what used to be Mesopotamia, and then from there you will continue on to the Persian Empire. There you will still meet the emperor, who will be ill and also flee the state, just as the Americans will leave Persia, where they will have settled. Later, Persia will be ruled by strict, murderous, and fanatical religious dictators and clergy. But by the time this happens, you will be back in your homeland and will be working on your mission, which will spread worldwide despite many opposing powers. But now I want to point out to you today that from the end of the 1960s of the latest, you will have to devote yourself intensively to it and make every effort to use all your knowledge in relation to the work you have learned and the skills you have acquired in order to build a seat of learning and to spread the teaching of Nocodamian throughout the earth. This will have to be done when you return home after many years of teaching and traveling abroad, and start building up your work and mission and then leading it worldwide. This will require many of your skills and knowledge in relation to a great many fields of work, which you will still learn in Switzerland and in many foreign countries. Your skills and knowledge of construction, electricity, agriculture, horticulture, plants, etc. will be very broad, and you will need them, because you will also have to do the construction work, bricklaying, carpentry, electricity, and much more yourself to build the entire headquarters. You will also have to work on the immediate and wider surroundings, as you have already seen and know them together with your mother and father when you walked around there. But by the time you buy your place there to live, it will be very badly run down, neglected, and dilapidated, as you would call something that is not maintained and is damaged. You will have to reforest the area, as you will also have to green all the run-down land with shrubs, many flowers, bushes, and various trees, etc. You will also have to level out the overgrown hill terrain that has been damaged by cows, as well as many other things in relation to the roads and paths that need to be built. In the house, you will also have to construct various new rooms using your carpentry skills. But even with your writing skills, you will have many books to write, produce, and implement. It will also be the case that you will have to inform yourself in detail and also learn new things, namely with regard to finance, on which I will now give you the following introductory explanation: the future of the earthly banking, corporate and business world, as well as politics, governments, and the economy, will be very profitable in the coming decades, after which, however, widespread mismanagement will emerge in all areas, just as from the 1980s well into the new millennium much will collapse, not only banks, but also companies. Large corporations and private individuals will be ruined as a result of financial mismanagement. Corruption and crime, because the wealth mania will be driven by capitalism, which has long since begun, to unprecedented heights until well into the next millennium. As a result of their obsession with wealth, Earth humans will know no bounds and will therefore engage in such immense criminal activities that they can no longer be overseen. Capitalism will severely restrict the freedom and honesty of human beings and will lead to a situation in which they will no longer have money in their own hands. This is due to their own low intelligence and inability to deal with money in the right way and not to squander it pointlessly, as well as to give the power of money to banks and other financial institutions in an ill-considered and falsely trusting way. In the future, Earth humans will also be robbed by their governments with ever higher taxes to such an extent that not a few people will fall into poverty as less fortunate. In Switzerland, the injustice will arise that those falling into poverty will be decried as paupers, who may well be allowed to live in poorhouses but are disregarded by the state and its communities and officials in their real need, On the contrary, however, much of the money will be given abroad to make up for and cultivate the image of Switzerland's helpfulness, while poverty is creeping in among quite a few Swiss people, among the generally poorly paid working class. This is happening while the leaders of all states on earth are paid horrendous salaries and then, after they have left office, also receive equally horrendous pensions. This is happening while all the human beings of the states that are at fault in this regard are really controlled down to the last penny by the absolutely irresponsible and debt-making state leaders, and are harassed and burdened with high taxes and unjust laws, rules, and regulations. This is happening while, in other respects, human beings worldwide are being generally curtailed to such an extent by banks, financial institutions, money companies and money conglomerates, etc., that they can only access their money through a card system, thus taking away the freedom of completely free and independent money management and money administration from human beings. The carelessness as well as the very badly rampant thought laziness of Earth humans in the coming times allows this without resistance, as well as a result of complete indifference and lack of interest, whereby they do not get out of slavery, which will continue to exist for centuries to come, but now and in the future only in a modern form. This is because Earth humans do not consider the fact that they actually make themselves slaves by choosing all the laws, regulations and rules, etc., in elections, just as they also choose the government and its officials, who then patronize and exploit the citizens. In this way and through this, Earth humans are not truly free, but are trapped, surrounded and even governed by countless laws, regulations and ordinances, as well as by prohibitions, etc., which means that they are completely defenseless within the sphere of influence of those in power and the heirs of those representing the state, such as municipal authorities, military laws, and also the police, and must obediently follow them, otherwise they will be punished. Especially in Europe, and thus also in Switzerland, as also in the USA and Canada, banks, companies, corporations, and many human beings in a private wise will fall into great and horrendous difficulties and will have to resort to state aid for their continued existence and survival. Although for some, their mismanagement will lead to bankruptcy. The United States and Germany in particular will fall into very large debts, as will 100 other countries that will provide completely irresponsible military aid to an Eastern Bloc country that will be involved in a long war, which as usual will be insidiously provoked by the United States. In this context, I have to mention Germany in particular, because the annexed state, which is under the thumb of America, will take in refugees from all over the world shortly after the millennium change in 54 years' time and support them financially to such an extent that the state, and other states too, will incur heavy debts. The very often illegal immigrations will also be in America, whereby this will be triggered overall by the low intelligence of a state authority in Germany, who will thoughtlessly call upon the Earth humans of the less well-off states to go to the northern and financially well-positioned states of the Earth and enter them in order to find their luck there. However, the populations of many of these countries, and particularly throughout Europe, but especially in Germany, the USA, and Canada, as well as in Switzerland, will also incur such financial debts on a private basis that the human beings will no longer be able to meet their financial obligations, just as national budgets in many countries will no longer be able to control their debts. The whole thing will lead to severe economic collapses and to the dissolution and bankruptcy of long-established and well-managed banks, companies and corporations, as well as to years of state financial problems, which, however, could lead to national bankruptcy under certain circumstances. This, as a result of precarious money ownership discrepancies, will also lead to murders, as immense debts will destroy many families and cause suicides. This, while over a very long period of time, Many changes of leadership will also occur as a result of the inability of autocratic, uneducated rulers who are absolutely incapable of governing to manage all state affairs and ultimately join a military organization that emerged in America in 1949 and is supposed to ensure security worldwide through murder and destruction. This, like many states in the coming period, will also recklessly join a nasty European dictatorship which will force its member states to do this and that. This will find its origin in the first stages in about 10 years, then be expanded in another decade through its further progress, and decades later will then find its founding as the European Union. This dictatorship, which will initially still advocate the death penalty, but which will later be abolished, will then bind many states to itself, whereby in later times, state leaders, as well as lowly intelligent and thoughtless people from the Swiss population, will also be tempted by the desire to profit from this dictatorship, or even to join it surreptitiously. As a result, Switzerland would not only lose its long-standing freedom, but also its neutrality if this union were to become a reality. Nevertheless, irresponsible, power-hungry leaders of Switzerland and the misled human beings of the Swiss population will be tempted or even ordered to join the dictatorship. All the compliant human beings of Switzerland, as well as many other states, will not only pursue their quest for power and their illusions and ill-considered desires, but will also be non-thinking, and thus so lowly intelligent that they are only worldly believers in the false policies of their leaders. And now to come back to the private sphere, as I have already said, large financial debts are incurred because of a senseless and uncontrollable squandering of money for many unnecessary things. This is because widespread and malicious family discord and family destruction are also taking place among the population and becoming the order of the day, as are very serious criminal and unlawful acts and deeds, which not only create constant discord, but also end in murder and manslaughter. Due to the looming and rapidly developing economic boom, employee wages will quickly increase and also drive the general standard of living into higher forms, which will tempt human beings to holiday trips to foreign countries, cruises on the seas and other things, as they cannot afford all their excessive desires with their wage income. For you, your family, the work and mission group and their individual members, as well as for a center that you will build according to your ideas with the help of your followers gathering around you at a place known to you. On a not too elevated site near the birthplace of your mother, you will have to make further efforts in your learning in the future to familiarize yourself with a large financial budget. You will earn the necessary finances for the purchase and expansion through hard manual labor, but also through life-threatening assignments and tasks that you will carry out in foreign countries and be well rewarded for. And in this regard, you will voluntarily take on the responsibility and administration of the community, which you will form as an association and whose members you will also support in an advisory and helpful capacity. However, the future of the financial economy will be difficult, because from 1988 onwards, the whole world will face a bleak future in terms of money, because a capital power will be established in the USA that will intervene in the entire world of finance as a globally active shadow bank and world shadow government, dominating many states and their structures. New means of payment and monetary values will also be introduced worldwide. In the USA itself, this capital power will develop into a shadow government within the state, which, in a wise that remains secret to the US population, will then govern the United States of America according to its will, as is also happening through another US shadow government that has existed for a long time and will also continue to exist well into the future. The new capital power that will be established in 1988, as I have already explained, will build up a worldwide capital network in a short time. And not only the financial world of banks, but also politics, various states in the world economy, and many states will be ruled according to the power structures of this world shadow government. Regarding these things and politics, which you will never do yourself, you have to learn a lot, so also many facts that I have already mentioned to you and will continue to mention. These are then to be used by you to write fact-finding and warning letters and to send them anonymously to the leaders of all states, regarding the dangerous and unpeaceful political world events that are coming, which in many states repeatedly cause serious wars, which as a rule very often find their origin in traditional American as well as usually devious hegemonistic machinations. But you should also show the threatening, disastrous Ausartungen that destroy nature and its fauna and flora, as well as water and climate, and all the natural things on the planet which will lead to natural disasters like those in the primeval world. This, if all the threatening and degenerate machinations of human beings in the future are not stopped and they irresponsibly continue to multiply in number. If this activity of increasing the Earth humans is not stopped, then technical developments will very soon arise from it in the future, which, among other things, will produce an artificial intelligence that will one day turn against Earth humans and fight them. The beginning of this is already set with the approximately 2.6 billion human beings and the far-flung Earth humans, which you will call overpopulation in the future, which has been caused since the 3 world wars, with the first one starting in 1756, then in this century of 1914 to 1918, and the one from 1939 to last year, which was ended by America's criminal act of viciously using atomic bombs and helped set climate change in motion. And that America has also fought the indigenous peoples in the vast American territories in a genocidal manner is also part of it. And particularly in this century, but also in the next millennium, the actions of America's rulers and their followers will continue to cause widespread war, mass deaths and much hardship, misery and destruction worldwide, and will also bring new diseases to Europe as a result. And it will also be necessary to mention that, as a rule, America will be largely to blame for this. Its powerful states stir up great mischief, and then the military carries out their wars which they instigate and allow to break out. And so it will continue in the next millennium, but in connection with the further development of mechanization and the evil abuse of atomic energy in many ways, as well as with the endless criminal, warlike, industrial and private production of gases and poisons, as well as plastics of all kinds, etc., which poison nature and its fauna and flora, as well as the seas and waters, glaciers and landscapes of all kinds. But as a result, a great deal affects the climate, which is now changing so rapidly that it is beginning to have a primeval effect, as the nature-destroying machinations of Earth humans challenge this in the next few decades, but which has already begun earlier and thus not just now, and will have serious consequences in the future. The World War of 1914 to 1918, with all its harmful deposits in the atmosphere, has also contributed a great deal to this, but no Earth human cared about that, but it contributes very strongly to the climate change, which will bring the now inevitably coming weather disasters, etc. So the dire effects of the climate destruction caused by the guilt and unreasonableness of earthly humanity will already be apparent in the next month of December, and that these coming climate changes, which will continue into the distant future, will have real consequences of the blatant and totally destructive machinations of the high number of Earth humans, will be denied by scientists and all those in positions of responsibility well into the next millennium. It will be the case that over time, the most diverse branches of science will recognize that all sorts of irresponsible machinations by humanity will have caused climate change. But there will still be no mention of the fact that all the nature-changing, planet-impairing, and climate-destroying machinations, in their immeasurable extent, are solely the result of the fast and unstoppable, as well as numerically high-growing Earth humanity, which is far above the Earth's tolerable level of coping ability. And in the future, the growing mass of human beings will very quickly damage and adversely change nature and its fauna and flora, as well as the planet, to such an extent that enormous disadvantages will also arise for Earth humanity, and to such an extent that for the time being, and for a long time and far into the next millennium, no help can be taken against it. The main causes of climate change, which, for the time being, will not be mentioned and will actually be a climate destruction, will be triggered in many forms by irresponsible machinations and by the ever-growing mass of humanity, whereby the manipulative forms will be based on the fact that the entire earthly ecosystem, the climate, the atmosphere and nature, as well as the entire planet, will be included and destroyed to its foundations. All of this will also be triggered by the irresponsible exploitation of the Earth's resources, the poisoning and pollution of the atmosphere, nature and its fauna and flora, the seas and inland waters, by a wide range of toxic substances, gases, emissions from internal combustion engines, and heating systems that use fossil fuels, artificial, toxic fertilizers and all kinds of herbicides, pesticides and many other substances also have a destructive effect on the whole of nature, fauna and flora, as well as on the planet itself, and this, like on human beings, causes many serious illnesses in them. And through toxic gases and all kinds of toxic dirt, the ozone layer in the oxygen will also be dangerously reduced and impaired, which will lead to skin cancer and other ailments in human beings, and also cause many changes in nature and in its fauna and flora. All seas and inland waters will also be polluted with toxic substances and all kinds of rubbish and badly contaminated, with even drinking water being contaminated with the poisons, and as a result, many Earth humans, animals, creatures, and other self-propelled life forms will become ill and even die, and this will also spread to the plant world, and many genera and species will be destroyed and wiped out. Many similar life forms are already complaining to each other about this, and they will do so even more in the future. Unfortunately, however, human beings do not understand these languages, and they even doubt that other life forms, such as animals, creatures, and others, have their own languages, depending on their genus and species, which consist of certain sounds. This, as also according to their genus and species, each has its own language. So for example, for human beings, inaudible tones or also radiating swinging waves or impulses, etc., even rock. Metal and each other matter exhibits its own languages, which are based on impulses or swinging waves of different form, which communicate in the same direction among each other genus or species. Especially the many types of plastics in all the world's waters will cause countless aquatic life forms to suffer and die. And this will also have an impact on all genera and species in fields, meadows, and the air, forests, and many terrestrial creatures. I will explain that plastic was invented in 1531 in what was then Germany from the processing of cheese as artificial horn or casein. But in the following decades, new forms and products will be invented, which in the course of a few decades will lead to a very serious and global environmental catastrophe because Earth humans will carelessly and irresponsibly throw away vast quantities of plastics in the open countryside. This will even happen at the highest altitudes of the mountains, which will be considered a prestige and a new sport when climbing them. And all the causes and effects will lead to environmental disasters that the whole of earthly humanity will find very difficult or impossible to control, because in relation to the irresponsibly ever-increasing and numerically higher-growing Earth humanity, overall, everything from environmental pollution to the pollution of the entire planet, to the impairment of flora and fauna, to the destruction of the climate and the atmosphere, will become more and more extensive, precarious, dangerous, destructive, and life-destroying. And the beginning of this was laid by the already existing sheer excess of Earth humans and their degenerate machinations, to which the already global and soon overwhelming climate change with its worldwide destructive consequences will belong in the worst wise. The USA will be primarily responsible for this and will bear full blame for it, namely through its criminal and irresponsible first atomic test and the 2 atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Although the Nazi regime in Nazi Germany had already made the first secret, but not entirely useless attempts at a nuclear base, it was only America that was really successful and was able to win the war with it, which meant that various states on Earth could also get hold of the atomic formula and from then on pose a great danger of a possible worldwide nuclear war and trigger an enormous catastrophe. These irresponsible crimes committed against the planet, nature, the climate, fauna and flora, and against Earth humans will now, from the coming month of December, lead to the first drastic and momentous consequences in terms of a very rapid and unstoppable global climate change that will have very adverse effects on all aspects of life and that can never be reversed. So in 8 months' time, the climate change, which will become more and more widespread and noticeable from now on, will announce itself irrevocably, leading to ever more severe natural disasters over the next 2,500 years, which will cause unprecedented human suffering and misery as well as destruction, particularly through global storms and massive rainfall, which will cause widespread devastating floods in Europe and around the world. But what will now result from the American atomic crime on a large scale on the planet, on all of humanity, on nature, fauna and flora, on the atmosphere and on the climate, will now all take its destructive course. Consequently, the first very severe climate changes are imminent, which will become apparent from the coming month of December, but will only break out in about 80 years. So it will come as it must inevitably come, namely that in the coming month of December, the whole of Central Europe will be hit by an unusual cold wave of up to -30 degrees Celsius, which will also take hold of England and lead to the death of a large number of human beings from frostbite, and will only end in the middle of March next year, that is, in 1947. But the coming extreme weather conditions will be even more far-reaching and will last until 1948, bringing much hardship, suffering and misery to human beings in other countries as well, especially after the turn of the millennium, and indeed well into the 3rd millennium in the future. And this will inevitably also be the case with the impending cold winter, which from next year will be referred to as the hunger winter, and will also be linked to the food crisis that began at the beginning of this year. This will claim the lives of several 100,000 human beings in Europe, which will also spread to the Soviet Union and claim the lives of more than 2.4 million human beings there, as well as unavoidable dire consequences in other countries. However, when the cold spell comes to an end in March next year, a major heatwave will begin and continue throughout Europe until the end of September, without a single drop of rain falling. This will be recorded in the annals as the Steppes Summer of 1947. And this will happen again and again for a long time into the 3rd millennium, because the Earth humans, who are becoming more and more excessive in number, are flooding the planet Earth, the whole world and its natural ecosystems through destructive machinations, and thus continue to irresponsibly cause and advance climate change, as they also increasingly drive the impairment of all life in nature and its fauna and flora. Depending on the location and area, temperatures in the world will occasionally reach between 39.5 degrees Celsius in the shade and 47 or even over 50 degrees Celsius in the sun, causing certain fruit trees to flower twice and bear small fruit. And all this will continue well into the 3rd millennium. Fields, vegetable gardens and meadows will dry up next year, as will small lakes and streams, and large lakes and rivers will also have very low water levels. And because rainwater will be missing everywhere next year, a lot of livestock will have to be slaughtered across Europe as a result of the lack of rain, because no more fodder will grow for the animals. There will also be a lack of water in nature, where animals will die of thirst. And so 2 years after the last World War, there will be great hardship all around, with human beings in certain areas suffering from hunger, which will be exacerbated by the extreme heat. And because there will be no rain at all in many places next year, and in many places there will be no water at all, the prospects for the harvest will be poor, because the days will be hot and sunny and no plants will grow. And because no rain will fall, the farmers will also not be able to sow the next seed. Consequently, there will be no great harvest, and then there will be a great shortage of certain foodstuffs. However, the whole issue of the cold spell and heat wave is trivialized by meteorologists, climate researchers, certain other scientists and the population, and attributed to natural weather changes, but not to climate change, because all meteorologists and all scientists as a whole are still unaware of this and therefore do not worry about it, but simply attribute it to the natural course of nature. It will therefore be claimed for a long time, well into the first years of the new millennium, that these are natural changing weather processes that occur from time to time. Consequently, during the following decades, neither learned scientists nor simple humanity itself will worry about the real causes. All know-it-alls, however, will contradict the facts without reason, that everything is due to the degenerating and irresponsible machinations of the Earth humans, who are overpopulating the Earth, and who are destroying everything with their destructive excesses and machinations, and who are to blame for the fact that everything in nature, the climate and the atmosphere, is changing so negatively. But everything will be so interrelated that it will spread more and more and begin to run rampant. The coming decades will also bring many new uprisings, civil wars, wars and revolutions around the earth well into the third millennium, as well as malicious and unscrupulous dictators continuing to exercise their murderous rule over their peoples, with the USA, as usual, will do everything in its power to overthrow foreign governments for its own advantage, whereby America often provokes this deviously, whereby it should also be said that worldwide the presidencies of many states are run more like dictatorships than free states. In the foreseeable future, there will also be a worldwide and religiously motivated sect-related and, on the other hand, inhumanly criminal terrorism, for which the USA, with its policy, and from the year 1756, practically all USA state authorities since then, have also delusion that world domination would have to be seized by America through secret service, military and military interventions in the affairs of foreign states, and that the defeated states would have to be robbed of their natural resources and treasures. And with very few exceptions, which you can count on half a hand, the coming US rulers will also do this, because the malicious American delusion of world domination will continue to exist without restraint, and also in the future the presidents of America will bring endless suffering, misery, torture, death and destruction upon the world, often with the help of American unscrupulous secret services. But all those elements who are currently in power and in the majority and thus of the same mind, will likewise, and all those of a similar nature who will be in the future will also act in the same manner. And it will be the state authorities themselves, as well as their advisors and followers, commanders and those carrying out orders in the secret services and military, etc., as well as those from the population who share the same views. But criminal organizations of many kinds will also emerge worldwide, as will extremely radical, racist and religiously sectarian murderous organizations, from which many religious and delusional death cults will also emerge, particularly in the USA, South America, Switzerland, Japan and Canada, as well as in Arabia, Africa, Asia, France, and some other countries in Europe and the East, will claim hundreds of thousands of lives as a result of religious madness and delusions of power. In particular, religiously fanatical and murderous terrorist sects will emerge in the Arab world and will carry out their bloody trade throughout the earth. Their speciality will be to spread murder, mass murder, destruction and suffering, hardship, misery, fear and terror, especially in America and Germany. You will have to consider all these facts just as thoroughly, and as a non-religious person, you will travel to Arabia, work there and immerse yourself in their religion, in order to understand it, in order to understand that it is not the truly believing who are the evil doers, but rather the righteous human beings, while all the degenerate and fanatical sectarians are misguided and passionate murderers. And this will come to pass, as also all that I have explained, said and taught you in recent years, because from the next decade you will have to write corresponding letters, which you are to send to all state leaders and to many public media around the world, to point out to them what will happen if earthly humanity does not finally learn, accept and practice reason extensively. 62. If this does not happen, if your words are ignored and do not bear fruit, then a very evil and dire future will await the earth and its humanity. And so that you can fulfill your task in this regard, I will continue to teach you good penmanship, as I have been doing since you were 4 years old through impulse guidance, without your conscious knowledge, which is how you learned to write without your parents knowing before you started school. Teacher Graf is informed about this, which is why he supports you in every way. And as I have done this since 1944 with your consent and knowledge, I will continue to do so, as Pastor Zimmerman also supports you, although you and he cannot prevent you from being disowned, beaten and persecuted by various members of the cult, and you will be unjustly harassed by order of the authorities of the municipality and the canton, and also by their subordinates. And this will also happen if you leave your home country, and you will therefore not find peace and security, as I have already explained to you. But despite the extensive knowledge you have acquired so far, you still have a lot to learn between now and 1953, and you should take a great interest in many things that you should know and understand. So you should be interested in a great many things, both fundamentally and exceptionally for your age, which will happen in your life, as well as in the world, in all sorts of ways, much more than what I have taught you so far in all the various explanations and predictions to date, and what I will also continue to teach and explain to you in the next few years. Actually, you should be interested in everything, especially because you have to learn to occupy yourself with everything through your thoughts and feelings and prepare yourself for it, in order to strengthen your psyche and to be able to cope with everything in every respect, although you have to remain silent about it and not tell anyone else. It would not make sense at all, and, above, it would be very dangerous if Earth humans were to learn about future events. Because in this regard, I have made the experience that without exception, the human beings of this world have always reacted wrongly and absolutely wrongly to future events. Therefore, you should hold back and remain silent about everything you know regarding the future, but you should never, despite your knowledge and ability, rise above other human beings, but always remain modest and just, because modesty and justice is the mother of all virtues, which you must always respect in every situation. Even if you know a great deal about future events and are more knowledgeable in these matters than human beings in general can be, and you will also have knowledge that cannot be attained by other human beings with regard to the doctrine of the mission and everything connected with it, you should always remain humble. Knowing in advance what is going to happen, as I have already made clear to you in other explanations, means in any case, whatever it may be, a very heavy burden on the consciousness and the psyche, especially when it concerns events that, on the one hand, are directed at you personally or, on the other hand, are directed against your personal attitude, honor, morals, behavior, and dignity with regard to the value of life, the well-being of human beings, all life forms and nature. And since, according to the teaching, your healthy attitude, your character, your morals, your sense of justice, and according to the laws and commandments of creation, known to you in a well-aligned wise. Your thoughts, feelings, and your perceptions also determine the forms of your behavior. You are opposed to everything that is perverse. Therefore, it is necessary that I continue teaching you, as I have done so far, how you can maintain and preserve the healthy state of your consciousness and your psyche through your thoughts, feelings, sensations, impulses and emotions, etc. However, in doing so, you must use your own intellect and reason, as well as logic, to follow the path given to you personally in this regard, and to achieve your goal. This is of significant necessity, because without this unavoidable learning to cultivate your thoughts and feelings, etc., in a correct and positive wise, so that your psyche remains balanced and healthy, you would not be able to cope with many explanations and predictions, because they would burden you so badly that you would break under them when they arrive in the future and then truly arise. Through learning, however, you will become powerful and controlling in your thoughts and feelings, learning to control them, and also being able to keep your state of consciousness and psyche under control. Even when you are struck by great suffering, pain, and deep sorrow, which you will encounter very often in your life and will therefore not spare you. So it is an imperative necessity that you deal with this now and in the future, and also prepare yourself for the future, and in particular to shape and control your thoughts and feelings to such an extent that you never fall into difficulties with your consciousness and psyche. So I will also teach you in a strict way according to our psychology, and let you decide and shape yourself in this regard. Consequently, as before, I will not indoctrinate you in any way or treat you to such an extent. So I will only instruct and teach you according to our psychology, which is superior to earthly knowledge, and this will be of great importance to you in order to educate and guide you in the right psychological way at all times. But it will also be necessary for you to be able to correctly recognize and assess the psychological impulses of human beings, whereby you can, on the one hand, protect yourself from harm, but on the other hand, you can also provide them with emotional and behavioral support, as well as psychological help for recovery when necessary and if you are asked for help. However, never presume to offer help in this regard on your own initiative, because this would not be desired. So, through my teaching and instruction according to our guidelines, you will gain much more knowledge than any earthly study of psychology could offer you. You have to get your psyche under control to such an extent that you can also cope with and endure very bad things without harm, because your life itself, as well as your task, your experiences and all the attacks on you and your life, as well as everything to come, will demand this of you. Consequently, you also have to cope with everything that misses the municipal and cantonal authorities, together with all their subordinates, the police, etc., will do to you in the future, and all the energy your psyche will demand of you, so that you can fulfill your mission, which will demand a great deal from you. And it will often be the case and necessary in your life that you have a strong consciousness, strong controlled thoughts and feelings, and a strong healthy psyche, because you will be faced with demands that normally human beings cannot cope with. Much will happen in your life, because you will lead an adventurous and not harmless life far from your homeland before returning home after many years, settling down and beginning your work and mission, which will not be easy, but will involve a lot of work and vicious attacks against your life and against you and your missionary efforts. However, outwardly, and I must say this again and demand it of you, you are to remain silent about everything and anything future in the presence of all Earth humans, because on the one hand, it would be dangerous to speak openly about what I have taught you as explanations and predictions, and also have to continue teaching, because foreknowledge of the facts would cause fear and horror in human beings. So you can talk openly about everything that does not concern such facts of silence, show the things about which I have already imposed silence on you, and also have to do so with regard to further information, and that for everything that I will still reveal to you during the next 7 years, Also, with power-hungry state leaders, as with any kind of significant leadership, and consequently also with racist organizations, religionists of all shades, with priests, pastors and theologians, with sects and scientists, as well as with criminals and opponents of any kind. Actions and deeds can be conjured up that can endanger you and your task and mission. If you agree that I block everything that has ever been explained to me in terms of the future, as well as with regard to your contacts with me and those in the future with my successors, then I can do that, but you can decide on that later. All knowledge, if you were to talk openly about it, could lead to worldwide man-made disasters, which must never be allowed to happen. However, it will not be possible to avoid the fact that you will be questioned and harassed by antagonists and weirdos, as well as by religionists and fanatical sectarians, and especially by self-important know-it-alls, by priests, pastors, and theologians, as well as by envious people and those seeking profit, and those who like to make themselves look big. Also, sectarians and all kinds of other adversaries will accuse you of lying, cheating, and charlatanism, and you will be called a fraud. And there will also be attempts on your life to silence you in the truest sense of the word, in order to damage your mission, make you look untrustworthy, and destroy you. But it will also not be avoidable that the military and state security services will monitor you, and that malicious people will denounce you to the authorities, secret services and police through lies and deception. But you should not pay attention to this, but simply continue your important work and mission unwaveringly, which will also bring success.
What you say and what you have also explained and taught me over the last few years, I can and did understand well. I have always thought about everything a lot, whereby some things also stimulated me in the wise that ultimately everything will turn out. This, for example, what ultimately results from the coming of the rapidly growing Earth humanity, which you have already mentioned several times and said that their behavior has caused and will continue to cause worldwide terror and many wars, disputes, and feuds, even after I have gone my last way. I am talking about the many effects of the politics and behavior of Earth humans that through these many evils will come about. That is why you have also instructed me to write down your explanations from 1951 and to spread them far and wide as warnings. But I think that I still have a lot more to learn for that, such as also what the origin of everything is, what will come in the times to come. Also with regard to the ever-increasing mass of Earth humans and everything that will result from it.
You are right and really think about everything, which is why you also asked about the origin of the coming events. The mass of the growing Earth humans, the evils that will arise from it in the future, I still have a lot to explain to you about that. But now I will first begin with what will be the beginning or origin of very many disastrous things, factors and bad events in the next 5.5 decades, which will also carry over well into the next millennium. Through the fault of the political, military, economic, scientific and all-world domination addicts, as well as the enormous criminal machinations of the USA, a lot of inhuman evil will break out worldwide as early as next year, and a lot of disaster will begin. The criminal actions of the USA will also lead to terrorism in many places. But food companies and the exploitation of natural resources are also destroying the livelihoods of millions of human beings through the destruction of nature and disasters. For the most part, all malicious incidents, such as wars, bloody uprisings and civil wars, as well as insidious secret service operations, revolutions, government overthrows, mass murders, destruction and annihilation, are being conjured up by the USA. This will incite countless private individuals and racists, as well as criminals, drug addicts and refugees, and the politically misguided, to attack and kill fellow human beings indiscriminately with guns and knives, etc. America will continue to bring much evil, hardship and misery, but also thousands of deaths over the earth and all of humanity. A religious, cult-like sectarianism caused by religious delusion, will also spread from America across the world and claim thousands of lives. From now on, and well into the future of the coming next millennium, America's new power-driven political, military and intelligence machinations will lead to wars and revolutions as well as terrorism around the world, because it will once again nuclear program and nuclear bomb tests and will also encourage other states to do the same, which will then be secretly continued in the coming times well into the next millennium, forcing a great many human beings to flee and contaminating a great deal with radioactivity. The USA's new nuclear program will lead to worldwide nuclear espionage precisely because of the global impact of this. In the course of time, as a result of espionage, the Soviet Union and China will also gain possession of documents on the atomic bomb technology and carry out many tests, contaminate many areas of land and water with nuclear material, and gain possession of bomb knowledge and plans, as well as other states acquiring the same and producing nuclear weapons and bombs. Espionage will be vigorously pursued. In order to obtain possession of the plans and documents, etc., relating to atomic bomb technology, this will also be pursued by various other states to the extent of murder. Consequently, in the time to come and for some time before the beginning of the next millennium, nuclear bombs will be produced and large stocks of nuclear weapons will be created in several other countries, in addition to the USA, China, and the Soviet Union, which will be called Russia again from the 1990s onwards. 99. The technical development of atomic technology, which is referred to as nuclear weapons technology and has been pursued by America since 1940, is based on research that was already being conducted by the Nazi Reich under Adolf Hitler, which made secret attempts but was deterred from achieving success by America and Russia and their victory over the Reich. As a result, a general military nuclear arms race is now spreading among the world's superpowers, particularly the USA and the Soviet Union. But they will also be joined by China and soon also England, France and Canada, as well as various other countries, even if they are not as powerful as the USA and the Soviet Union. Since the Western states, especially Europe and the USA, have always been hostile to the Russian Empire, Russian Tsardom, Russian Tsarism, this will lead to an arms race between all states and to the invention of ever more modern weapons. In addition, a so-called Cold War will break out in this century, which, however, will end early in the next millennium, and, as usual through the fault of America, trigger a war that will have begun through Russia, but will effectively come about through the fault of America. However, weapons and money are irresponsibly supplied by America and many pro-American states to support the war-torn country, while the war is secretly waged by America via the warmongering president of the state. This causes a great danger because if the states, which irresponsibly supply weapons and further encourage America's world domination ambitions, do not come to their senses and end their partisanship and arms deliveries, then very evil things will happen. Nuclear bombs will be created unchecked in various states in particular, as will hydrogen bombs, plutonium implosion bombs, etc., which will then be secretly tested and release an enormous amount of energy. This will take the form of an explosion from nuclear reactions and through nuclear fission or nuclear fusion, with nuclear research producing a wide variety of different variants in this regard. And in the future, many thousands of such bombs and other nuclear weapons will be created by the world's superpowers, especially the USA and the Soviet Union, or rather Russia, as well as by fanatical religious states, and in this wise a dangerous condition for the whole earth will be brought about, which will stand under an evil sign of a threatening worldwide and world-destroying nuclear war until nearly the next but one millennium. And it will be many times in the 1970s and 1980s that nuclear wars threatened to break out due to misunderstandings. One time, it will be due to a false report from a Soviet spy satellite that will record solar reflections on clouds, which will then be misinterpreted as the launch of a US nuclear missile against the USSR and become the threat of a Soviet nuclear strike. As a result of the nuclear arms race, further dangerous situations will arise again and again from now on, and also in the coming decades due to misunderstandings of actions, as well as a result of espionage and deliberate or invented false reports. Because military false alarms have been around since time immemorial, especially since the beginning of the nuclear age, which was criminally brought about by America, and which began as early as 1940. And such false alarms will occur again and again in the future because of the extensive defectiveness of the faulty defense concepts of the American and Soviet military blocs, as well as in all the missile early warning systems of all armies, which will constantly conjure up threats of nuclear war and other dangers, etc. Particularly great dangers will unfold in the coming decades and well into the next millennium if the fear, low intelligence and irrationality of those obsessed with power, especially the American leadership and their unintelligent advisors, lead to increased tensions between the USA and the USSR, or later between America and Russia, whereby, however, as has been the case since time immemorial, the dangerous acts of aggression will come from the United States of America, which will also disseminate new types of flying weapons of destruction and give rise to a new type of warfare. This will happen while the Soviet Union, or later the future Russia, will hold back but remain suspicious, and will also behave accordingly. This will also apply in particular when a laxly managed policy of détente collapses in the late 1970s and 1980s, resulting in a new mutual and very strong mistrust between the two world powers, which will be driven to a high and very dangerous peak and lead to a further and insane increase in the nuclear arsenal, which could destroy the entire Earth's surface and all life. And it will be that in many cases the world will only just escape a nuclear war, but the world's rulers will learn nothing from this, which is why nothing will change as a result. And in 1949, the so-called North Atlantic Treaty will be founded, which will arise and come about on the basis of the so-called United Nations, ostensibly to create a global system of collective security. The North Atlantic Treaty owes its origin to the signing of the Charter of the United Nations, which took place in San Francisco on the 26th of June last year, and is then regarded as the Constitution of the Community of States, which was also intended to create a Western European alliance and thus a global system of collective security. Nevertheless, the end of the World War that ended in 1945 did not usher in a phase of global peace, but a state of affairs that would lead to a so-called Cold War, which would become a factor in future political, military, and economic development until a certain point in time, and would also threaten to degenerate into a nuclear war on various occasions. As a result of the inability of the state mechanism of America and the USA and the Soviet Union, which, as great powers, have been hostile to each other for a long time, and the only ones of all the states involved in the last World War, are pursuing different military and political interests. In this context, American demands were and are generally made of the USSR that are only advantageous for the USA. And this will continue to be the case because America, in the well-known bending or breaking of its world domination delusion, wants to be the sole unconditional determinant of all world events. Thus, both states, America and the Soviet Union, as well as later America and Russia, as former allies in the World War triggered by Hitler and the Nazi Reich, will continue to create conflicts between themselves, which will further lead to antagonisms between America and the Soviet Union, whereby the hostility and these antagonisms since the end of the World War will become even more blatant and open than they were before. And this enmity will not remain with the USA and the USSR, but will also be carried far into the world into many other countries, spreading and causing uprisings, wars, revolutions, discord, and terrorism. It will also be the case that America, through its religious fanatics and the military forces and state politicians, as well as its secret services, will often interfere in foreign affairs and problems in order to force, provoke, and carry out coups d'état in a devious and world-dominating manner as usual. Consequently, America will bear a great deal of the blame for wars, terror, destruction and upheaval, etc. And in this way will never become a state of peace and righteousness as long as it indulges its delusions of world domination and spreads death, destruction and endless fear throughout the world. As a result, other states, their leaders and certain sections of their populations are consistently forced into sham friendships and into friendly relations with America. Although this is rejected, although those who present themselves as America-friendly do not dare to openly admit this for fear of incurring disadvantages or being harmed. And since American political power, but not the majority of the people themselves, continues to covertly tend towards absolute world domination, American secret services and military power, directly and indirectly, as well as the economy, are also active in foreign countries, constantly undertaking actions that carry out wars as well as veiled acts of terrorism and state leadership infiltrations, and then keep these states under control in an occupation-like manner. All this is handled in all the states of the earth by America's grace to such an extent that the military, secret services and spies, as well as American politics and economics, are able to establish themselves, resulting in adverse political, military, and economic disadvantages for the state in question. America's actions also and everything leads to uprisings, anarchism, turmoil, civil discontent, xenophobia and racial hatred, as well as to anarchistic, deadly and criminally influenced political groups and mobs that will indulge in murder in their madness of terror. But there will also be global terrorist organizations, particularly in Arabia, whose fanatical religious founders will be trained by American military personnel, etc., to become fighters who will then gather like-minded people around them for terrorism and carry out very bloody religious political struggles, as well as murders and destruction throughout the world, and spread terror as they also mercilessly torture and murder countless people of other faiths and also innocent human beings in a bestial manner. But as I have already explained to you in previous explanations, in the coming times and well into the next millennium, America will cause many state systems to collapse in several foreign states due to secret service, military, criminal and terrorist activities, as well as warlike, terrorist and subversive political and economic machinations. Many state systems will collapse and in some cases lead to civil and terrorist wars, resulting in very large and long-lasting flows of refugees and mass migrations. The public will never know and will not be informed that America will be the originator or mastermind of it all, because this will be prevented by all conceivable means, including the committing of murders at a frequency that cannot be calculated because everything will be done in secret and in a devious manner. All of this will lead to the development of very unpleasant and far-reaching terrorism, as well as an unstoppable refugee crisis that will continue for a long time into the future and will be intensified by the low intelligence and incompetence of the woman who will be the leading person in Germany for many years, as I have already mentioned. Over time, this will result in very extensive flows of refugees that will spread across the earth and will comprise around 80 million refugees in 70 years, because in the new millennium, the irresponsible, naive, ill-informed ruler in Germany will do everything in her power to ensure that millions of refugees from politically and economically underdeveloped, unstable, war-torn and often terrorist-ridden states flock to Europe and America. Many of them will only be real and endangered refugees in name, because a large number of others will flee their homes in the coming times only for economic, criminal, thieving and terrorist reasons in order to profit in the countries of refuge and to act in a criminal and thieving manner. But there will also be those who, in a religious sectarian madness, falsely claim to be refugees in need in order to reach religious terrorist states in which other religions and sects prevail. In order to spread death, disaster, and destruction there, especially among the innocent and uninvolved people of other faiths. However, the majority of all those in government and other positions of responsibility will be powerless and also largely incapable of dealing with the emergence of all the problems that arise in a logical, clear, and reasonable way, because they will, contrary to all reason, make wrong and inadequate decisions and come up with and decide on measures that will be useless and allow the evils to continue. Furthermore, the people in charge and those responsible will often be hypocritical do-gooders or religiously gullible, which is why the correct action will not be taken to end the flow of refugees. As a result, the problems and difficulties in dealing with the masses of refugees and what should be done about them will increase even more, making the necessary solutions more difficult, to such an extent that ultimately coercive measures will have to be taken that sow hatred and enmity in the only nominally so-called refugees, from which evil deeds will arise in evil Ausartung. However, it will not only then become apparent that immigrant criminal, terrorist and criminal elements are being given an easy way to commit unlawful acts and deeds, and thus also to murder, mass murder and destruction, but it will already begin with the low intelligence of the woman in the German government revealing the wish that all refugees from underdeveloped or developing countries should be granted the right to be admitted to the rich economic countries of the North, and also to be given work there. So in the future, more and more extensive problems and Ausartungen arise, by evil Gewalt, Kriminalität as well as Verbrechen, as a result of the coming refugee disaster and the many political, paramilitary, racist and religious and sectarian exceptionally shaped terrorism, particularly at the beginning of the next millennium and far beyond in Europe and also in America, as well as almost worldwide. And it will be and become that then only very rigorous measures could solve the entire refugee flows and refugee problems, whereby, however, the necessary measures and steps are to be taken by all those in government and other responsible parties, and consequently correct and effective measures are to be implemented without mercy, but humanely. But first of all, no correct decisions or precautions will be taken, nor will correct actions be taken, and therefore prudence will be required and correct action will have to be announced. And this will be so because Earth humans neither see reality nor are able to judge everything correctly. Consequently, the problems will not be solved at first, but will deepen and multiply, after which only the adversity will stimulate thought and reason, and the correct solution will be sought, which will also be the case when the streams of refugees have already brought much evil. However, all those in positions of responsibility will not see what will result from all this, because they will lack understanding and will not be able to reason rationally, which will be because some of those in government and others who decry their responsibility will only think and act for themselves, whereby they will be completely indifferent to everything else, and thus also to the weal and woe of their fellow human beings. Therefore, it will also be the case in the future, especially in Europe, that all the various security organizations of the states severely affected by the refugee situation will not only be extremely naive, careless and inexperienced, but will also fail to recognize the real situation for a long time. So they will all fail to realize that a very large number of criminal and criminal elements, as well as politically and religiously radicalized people and sect-controlled murderers and terrorists on a mission of destruction, are entering Europe, and also America and other countries of refuge are smuggled into Europe, America and other countries of refuge, under the guise of refugees, where these individuals or groups will then spread death, disaster, ruin, and destruction over time. On the other hand, Some of those responsible for refugees will be so out of touch with reality, naive, as well as sensitive, weak, effeminate, fragile, squeamish and in their thoughts, feelings and humanity so lowly intelligent and also sickly that they will trivialize everything and do everything to make all evils increase further and multiply all problems even more. And if the leaders and politicians and other responsible parties are addressed at all, who are often controlled by the economy, they will always or mostly only give short and meaningless answers because they are not able to think deeply, because their intellectual performance usually does not correspond to a high level, and also hardly a high intelligentum is demanded, in order to become a state leader. In this regard, I have already explained several things to you several times over the past 2 years, but it should now also be pointed out that the rapidly increasing population of the Earth will also produce such activities in the future that will be politically, religiously and sectarily as well as terroristically motivated, that malicious, murderous and destructive consequences will be caused worldwide. Due to the inexorably increasing excess masses of the human population on Earth, more and more religious believers and sectarians, as well as murderous or morbidly killing or otherwise degenerate human beings, will very quickly come to the fore. These will also be human beings who have fallen prey to a completely degenerate, blind, fanatical, bloodthirsty and death-seeking pursuit, or otherwise a delusion. And particularly in Asia, the Near East, as well as in Arabia and Africa, but also in other regions of the earth, large religion-related, murderous and organized sects will form, which will spread death and terror worldwide. And all of this will be unavoidable and will happen, as a look into the future clearly shows and the first signs of which are already emerging today. Fanatical religious and sectarian beliefs represent a dangerous return of religions and sects in the coming decades and in the next millennium, through which evil and deadly faith-based conflicts, torture, violence, murder, wars, terrorism, oppression, rape and destruction will be triggered. The truth shows in this regard that the role of religions and sects is ambivalent and thus ambiguous, dishonest, divided and shady, and that they cause serious conflicts and differences of opinion and thus disagreements, disputes and even wars, with fanatical religious factors being responsible for many malicious aberrations and effects and playing a major bloody role. Among the believers of the various main religions and their almost innumerable sects, violence, persecution, hatred and even murder have prevailed in many cases since time immemorial. Although all religions and their sects preach justice, love, peace and humanitarianism, which, however, corresponds to nothing more than a phrase of concealment, to such an extent that each religion and sect can captivate and exploit all of its believers in the world through its dogmas and beliefs. Furthermore, it is intended to conceal from the faithful that religions and sects are in fact hostile to one another, which, however, has always been vehemently denied, and each of the religions and sects deviously tries to lure away the faithful from the other faiths. It will also be the same in the future, because in the coming new times, and even before the turn of the millennium, it will happen through radio with a secret and global plan and implementation of cross-denominational prayers, meetings of believers, prayer groups and discussion groups, community festivals and church services, etc., that all kinds of religious believers and sectarians and every believer will be confronted with it in a faith-numbing manner. But bloody and deadly religious and sectarian machinations will also increase throughout the world in the way that they will in the coming month of August, and in the way that they will in the case of India, which is full of people, when, as a result of government disputes between the Islamic faithful and the Hindu faithful, vicious and bloody clashes will be provoked in the city of Calcutta, claiming more than 2,300 human lives. And this will continue well into the next millennium, because, as has always been the case, The believers of one religion and sect will be hostile towards the other religions and sects, the Christians and Jews against the Muslims, and vice versa, the Buddhists against the Hindus and vice versa, and all other religious believers and sectarians against other religious believers and sectarians. This is how the future will be in this regard, and it will also come in the 21st century in many places around the world, where torture and violence, murder, death, discord, rape, and destruction will be 100,000 times over, and fear will prevail. And this will come about in the same way through unreason and political partisanship, as well as through the hatred that will arise among large sections of the population in those countries, which will be flooded by streams of refugees, and the refugees will have a different faith from the locals. The consequences of this will be xenophobia, religious hatred, hatred of religious sects and race, and in the new millennium hatred of Jews will flare up again with renewed vigor, because the State of Israel, which will be founded in 2 years' time, will create a vicious, murderous secret service, whose agents will then commit murders without compunction and carry out secret assassinations, as will also be done in the years of the next millennium, in a war against the Arabs bordering Israel. This will happen when war is triggered by Arab forces, after which a hate-filled Israeli mass murderer will in turn wage war against the neighboring Arab population and attempt to exterminate them through genocide. This war will spread to other countries and cause pillaging, violence, deviousness, murder, manslaughter, inhumane acts and deeds, as well as great destruction and deceitful mass murder attacks by the coming Israeli Secret Service. And in many other states, particularly in Europe and the USA, groups and even large-scale race hatred organizations will form to incite xenophobia and racial hatred among the populations of the respective countries, as well as spreading their hateful behavior to other states and other populations, where further and similar groups and organizations with an evil disposition will be formed, which will then also join forces with other like-minded people across borders. A new religious hatred and bigotry will very quickly develop out of xenophobia and racial hatred, an open hatred of those of different faiths, but also of those who think differently in other ways, who do not associate with xenophobia, racial hatred, or religious hatred, but remain independent thinkers and who, as individuals, will distance themselves from it. So it will come to be that the hate-obsessed and the dissenters, and those distancing themselves from hate, will also form groups and organizations and defend themselves against any radical machination regarding hostility, callousness, ruthlessness, inhumanity, and irreconcilability, etc. towards dissenters and those of different faiths. But they will change their minds and begin to defend themselves against the excess of economic refugees as a result of the ill-considered actions of a powerful state in Germany, are entering the economic states of the Earth's north from underdeveloped states. The long-time well-meaning will become more and more hostile towards these refugees, and ultimately everything will lead to the refugee situation leading to bloody conflicts and being fought. And finally, it will be unavoidable that the governments and security forces of the countries will also be drawn into these machinations, as a result of which civil war-like conditions or even actual civil uprisings could arise from all of this if the whole thing is not stopped and order is not restored. Many who indulge in xenophobia, racial hatred, religious fanaticism, and sectarianism will succumb to an uncontrollable power illusion and, through anarchism, torture, violence, and murder in their xenophobia, religious fanaticism and sectarianism, racism, and other delusions, to an obsession to be absolutely right in order to be able to determine the life and death of fellow human beings. This delusion will be followed by the obsessed and their like-minded followers, who will gather around them, and they will then resort to weapons and all kinds of other deadly means in order to carry out assassinations and acts of terror worldwide, massacring and murdering human beings and destroying much. 156. The great mass of overpopulation, which I now call by name, will bring with it the inevitable unemployment, hardship, misery, and ever-increasing poverty, as well as more and more legal and human injustice. It will also all come together, and to a great extent, that Earth humans will become highly susceptible to diseases, such as cancer, as well as old age ailments and old age stupidity, etc. All this and other evils will prevail more and more in the future, as will unemployment, as a result of which countless human beings will live without work and without action into the days and into the time, no longer have a regulated future, and also see no future and become tired of their hopeless state. And this gives rise to an irresponsible attitude in many human beings, and also to a great deal of crime, which will then get out of hand and horrendously exceed anything seen before in this regard, and will cause many suicides. As a result, there will undoubtedly be an endless number of mostly young and younger Earth humans who, due to hopelessness, will fall prey to crime, and who will also listen to political seducers, as well as religious and sectarian hate preachers and terrorists, and other criminal propagandists, and will become hopelessly enslaved to them, and many a human being will acquire this evil in this way, intensify it within himself, and thereby become depraved. All evil and wrongdoing has its beginning and origin in places of worship, in sects, families, and in groups and communities, in military armies, and through public bodies of many kinds. And it is happening and will happen with new and modern techniques and means of information, with blazing fanaticism through recruiters and propaganda, whereby individual human beings or whole groups or communities are indoctrinated by this and that unrighteous thing. This is because everything will be based on suggestive recruitment talk and hate speech for violence, war, and terror. Murderous attacks, as well as war, murder, manslaughter and suicide bombings, and other bestial Ausartungen, as well as tremendous wars and destruction, lead in the future to the next millennium and further, which will absolutely come true and become reality. So in the future, women will also very often go to war and spread terror, causing untold suffering, misery, pain, disaster, death, ruin, and destruction. While it has been men who have brought their murderous and destructive Ausartungen to bear in uprisings and wars, etc., in the future it will also be women who will practice the bloody trade of killing and murdering, as well as the senseless destruction of laboriously constructed human achievements. And the more the masses of Earth humans grow, the more young and younger human beings in particular will see no opportunities for their future and mistakenly believe in the sectarianism. Assassinations, torture, war, murder, suicide, death, rape, and destruction, and will consequently be followed by many human beings who will become addicted to their evil diatribes and lies. In this wise, everything related to this, as also all evil, perverse and destructive and devastating, will continue to spread and become more malignant, expanding into murderous terror and even death-dealing terror organizations, which on the one hand are strongly political, but also religious and very strongly and particularly sectarian, and in this respect interest-driven and power-determined. This is mainly due to Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism. And in a religious sectarian way, several special terrorist organizations will form, which will be large and powerful, whose murderous and destructive actions and mischief, especially in various Islamic countries, but also in Europe and the USA and in Asia, will claim many thousands of human lives. These murderous cultist organizations, as a result of the false interpretation and understanding of their mother religion, will spread murderous havoc without mercy and conscience and completely irresponsibly, without any mercy and humanity, as well as without forbearance, and they will spread death and destruction in many countries worldwide, and even take control of and terrorize entire or large parts of countries if they are not stopped in a decisive manner as is rightfully theirs. But also, many power-hungry dictators, rulers and military leaders in many countries will cause death and destruction, which will result in multiple changes of government in the future. But these will be accompanied by violence in the form of bloody and murderous uprisings, revolutions and government overthrows, which is already determined and will inevitably come and be. Many states will be confronted with acts of war, but above all America will stand, which, as it has done since time immemorial, will continue to interfere in foreign countries' affairs in a criminal, irresponsible and criminal manner, politically, militarily, and through its secret service, and will strive for world control and world domination. But also authorities and courts that are supposedly close to the people will act with blood, torture, and death. And they will do so by judging human beings in a murderous way and handing them over to the death penalty full of revenge, as will also be the case tomorrow, Monday, in Hamburg, in Germany. There, 11 people will be sentenced to death because they were guilty of being concentration camp guards during the war. However, as a result of the judges responsible for this, further murders will be committed instead of all 11 guilty parties being justly deprived of their liberty for life and punished in this way. And these death sentences will be followed by many others of the same kind by Allied military courts in Germany, and not only for war crimes and murder, but also for many other crimes. In many other countries around the world, too, people are sentenced to death and murdered in this way, supported by legality, and consequently human beings are handed over to death, because there is no humanity and no justice, but only dictatorial, bloodthirsty legislation, as a result of which human freedom and peace are restricted, become restricted, or are even completely absent. This is because there is a threat of death, and the death penalty encourages human beings to murder. Deep down, they are gripped not by humanity, but by ambitions of revenge and the urge to retaliate, which come to the fore at every opportunity, no matter how small. And what all the states of the earth have, especially America, is in relation to the death penalty, whereby it also does a lot in addition to many other relationships that does not reach the public. Nor does the fact that since the end of the World War last year, it has also benefited a lot from many Nazi criminals, and also from Nazi war criminals. This, for example, is kept secret, that a great many of the Nazi scientists who worked in various fields in the war and in the Nazi Reich were transported to America by the American military, in order to use their knowledge and skills for America from then on. This is because America benefits from the knowledge and skills of all the many Nazi scientists, which will lead to America being able to reach into the solar space above the Earth in 15 years, and then in later years to reach up to the Moon. The Soviet Union will also do the same and reach orbit around the Earth before America. Many of these scientists, or as you once called them, Nazi criminals, were transported to America by the American military as specialists in the development of new weapons technologies of all kinds, and especially for rocket development, in order to be used, as I said, for the development of all kinds of secret weapon systems, rocket systems and aircraft systems. 171. So and are these war criminal elements, of which more than 1,500 specialists and scientists with Nazi background are already in America, but many more will follow, and all of whom, through their inventions and developments, must help the USA to become the greatest world power, not held accountable, but employed in special positions and endowed with special rights, while also being granted state protection. As a result of the irresponsible actions, activities and crimes of almost all of humanity on Earth, the planet, the atmosphere, the climate, the land and the waters, as well as nature, are suffering destruction, exploitation, and even horrendous extinctions of fauna and flora, which are increasing and even rising to tens of thousands a year. And recently, masses of new poisons and other new toxic substances have been invented, which are spread throughout nature worldwide to combat unwanted plant pests, but which not only poison the entire soil, the atmosphere, and all waters in the long term, but also have a pathogenic effect on Earth humans, which will inevitably come. This, as also by power-obsessed and irresponsible rulers, military and scientists, etc., but also by the majority of the population, as well as many corporations and companies of all kinds. Irresponsible and destructive work and machinations will be carried out worldwide in all states in the future that will harass, severely damage, and even exterminate the planet and nature, as well as all life of all genera and species, which will appear and arise in a worldwide manner and will come and be absolutely irrevocable. In this respect, the United States of America and Europe will be at the forefront of the production and use of such poisons, in order to also spread them worldwide for profit, thereby flooding all states on Earth with toxic substances of all kinds, so to speak. But first and foremost, espionage is being conducted regarding the development and use of nuclear weapons, and has been for about a year. 174. Even researchers and scientists of the Nazi Reich tried to develop modern weapons systems since 1938, and again during the period of the ended World War, and after the monstrous American atomic crimes in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But fortunately, no usable nuclear weapon has been created so far, otherwise the Earth and humanity would have been plunged into a nuclear catastrophe. But it is inevitable that worldwide espionage will be crowned with success, and that various states will come into possession of the atomic formulas. Nevertheless, through the fault of America and those countries that will in future diligently emulate America, a worldwide catastrophe will spread, but a special explanation is necessary for this, which I will now give you, in which a Nazi war criminal named Kammler and his actions are of particular importance. Kammler is still an unscrupulous and very precise, logical and extremely calculating thinker, a trained architect and engineer, and it was clear to him from the very beginning of the war in 1939 that it could not be won, and that victory against the world powers America and Soviet Union was altogether hopeless because Hitler and his followers greatly underestimated the world powers America and Soviet Union and those allied with them in terms of their overall weapons arsenal and military potential. From the very beginning, Kammler knew what would inevitably happen, because he saw through everything from the start and also knew that by ruthlessly cooperating with the Nazi regime, he could take advantage of his great opportunity to live out his power mania. He also entertained the idea of defecting to the enemy with important documents on research material, etc., if the war situation became dangerous for him. Consequently, he calculatedly adapted to everything, but only for the sake of exercising power and to swing himself up to a powerful Nazi figure, and thus to become one of the most powerful men in the Nazi regime. Thus, from the very beginning of Hitler's rise to power, he was a kind of traitor to Hitler and the Third Reich, because he did not work for them, but only for himself and his lust for power. In addition to his treachery, Kammler was severely personality disordered, which he knew how to routinely cover up and conceal from the human beings with whom he had contact, thanks to his acting skills. This enabled him to quickly rise to become an important Nazi figure, SS Obergruppenführer and General of the Waffen-SS of the Nazi dictatorship, as well as a power-hungry and extremely cold-blooded mass murderer, an unscrupulous racist and Jew hater, and a malicious hater of human beings in general. He was also responsible for the jet aircraft program, as well as for the very numerous underground armaments factories, which, according to Hitler's orders, also had to produce the V-1 winged bombs and the V-2 ballistic missiles. But when the end of the war came, Kammler, for the sake of his personal safety, shunned all the might he had exercised, and with the help of two confidants, also seized secret and extremely important plans relating to the atomic research records from the nuclear weapons research program. These related to a nuclear fission project and uranium project that had been secretly pursued in Germany since the German discovery of nuclear fission in 1938, as Hitler had ordered, until the end of the Second World War. He personally gave the order to advance the technology of nuclear fission and to make it usable in order to develop it into a devastating and all-destroying nuclear weapon. The research in this regard, which was conducted with the utmost secrecy, was taken very far and was about 17 years ahead of the similar research and development in America, which was still in its early stages and also conducted in secret. Although the hard-working Nazi scientists in Germany achieved some success, they were unable to produce a functioning atomic bomb or other nuclear weapon by the end of the war. The Nazi dictatorship was therefore unable to carry out any actual nuclear weapons tests, which is why only 2 small explosion tests could be carried out, which, however, had only minimal success and were therefore of no significant importance. The scientists also did not succeed in producing a real nuclear chain reaction in a reactor, because despite all the very extensive construction efforts, they did not succeed in realizing correspondingly usable reactors. Nevertheless, the research was very advanced. Although it was not so successful that a satisfactory result of realization was imminent, everything was well developed according to plan. And Kammler, with the help of his 2 confidants, was able to obtain valuable records and plans, along with almost 68 kilograms of weapons-grade uranium, which was secretly manufactured. With all the necessary stolen documents and the uranium, he managed to turn himself into the American Secret Service and hand everything over to them, hoping to be welcomed, protected, and not put on trial. In fact, despite his truly high level of intelligence and cunning, he was more than just naive in this regard. He was abnormally lowly intelligent and naively hopeful, thinking that as the bearer of the stolen secret research papers, the results, plans, and the uranium, he would be appreciated as a valuable defector, brought to America and protected by the Americans. But they knew that he was one of the worst Nazi war criminals, who was accused of mass murder and could not be trusted. Consequently, he was arrested when he turned himself in to the secret services. All his stolen secret records and plans and the uranium were taken from him, and he was then taken to a prison in America as a dangerous and traitorous prisoner. The Americans were therefore aware of the progress being made in nuclear fission research and their own efforts, and naturally confiscated the stolen material from Kammler, although they had no idea that the Nazi Reich was involved in nuclear research. The fact that America had gained possession of the Nazi nuclear research materials before the Soviet Union was able to do so was probably not pleasing to them later in this regard, because they did not gain all the important knowledge of the Nazi scientists, whose knowledge they would have liked to get hold of, just as the Americans were able to acquire it. The fact that the Americans were also able to secure Nazi knowledge and development in the field of jet aircraft production and rocketry in relation to the plans as a whole, and that the Americans were shocked by the advanced techniques of the Nazis, was of course kept secret. So the Americans hunted for further plans, records, scientists and researchers, as well as parts of entire nuclear plans and production plans. New Nazi techniques to secure the Nazi know-how before it all fell into the hands of the Soviet Union. For this, of course, they also needed Kammler, who, with his knowledge and his records and plans, as well as the uranium handed over, was extremely welcome to them, but not for the reasons they had hoped. After his arrest last May, he was taken to America as a prisoner and has since been held in a high-security wing of a prison, where he has been interrogated repeatedly for hours on end. This eventually becomes too much for him, and in the course of the next year he will end his life by suicide, as I have seen in advance. This is all kept secret and will therefore never be revealed to the public, but will always be denied. but that America has greatly benefited from the research records, results, findings, and plans, and the weapons-grade uranium obtained from Kamla for their own research, plans and experiments, etc., is absolutely and indisputably certain. Only through the advanced knowledge gained by Kamla in Nazi nuclear fission research was it possible for the United States to conduct the first atomic bomb test at the White Sands Missile Range near the city of Alamogordo, New Mexico, by the USA under the name Trinity Test, or Trinity, and then the 2 atomic bombs were built that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And these irresponsible and criminal atrocities against all of humanity. The planet, the atmosphere, nature, flora and fauna, all land and water, and the climate will continue this year because America's criminal nuclear tests will continue. So it will also not remain with the dropping of the atomic bomb on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima on 6th of August and Nagasaki on 9th of August, and their destruction last year, which claimed several 100,000 human lives and left countless human beings wounded and irradiated by atomic radiation. And all the criminally involved and supporting elements, irresponsible and dehumanized in their attitude, continue to believe in their madness that they are in the right and that they have acted and must continue to act in their criminal and inhumane manner in the correct way. So it is that in the coming month of July, the USA will conduct 2 new nuclear weapons tests as before, namely on the Bikini Atoll, which was already completely irradiated 6 years ago and which will be misused again for nuclear weapons testing from 1950. Already, the first atomic bomb test and the dropping of nuclear bombs were an outrageous crime against humanity, against the planet, against nature and its fauna and flora, as well as against the atmosphere and the climate. In addition to all the countless negative and destructive machinations of Earth humans, this is now having a devastating and unusually rapid effect on the planet and on nature, resulting in a climate upheaval that will now occur over the next few decades. This will bring enormous flood masses all over the world, especially from the beginning of the next millennium, and thus also to Europe, and will also claim many human lives and cause enormous destruction. And with the new atomic bomb tests, also elsewhere on Earth by other states, as well as through unexpected nuclear accidents and failures of safety systems in nuclear power plants that are being built, the whole thing will have a very malignant effect on entire nature, the climate and all plant life and all living creatures on land and water. As mutations are produced and areas become uninhabitable for hundreds and even thousands of years due to nuclear contamination. All this, in addition to the fact that countless human beings will fall ill and die from radioactive contamination, which will also be used in this wise by the state and by criminals to murder human beings who are becoming unwelcome, for example, for certain religious sectarian organizations, politics and secret services, as well as dictatorships and the military, etc., especially through America's and other states' secret services of various state leaders. Many such crimes are caused and furthered, as well as criminal organizations are bred by other states, as this will also happen in a purely private way, especially based on Islam, as this has been the case since time immemorial with regard to sectarianism of all kinds and of crimes. And the crimes against all of earthly humanity are being further fueled by the United States of America, as a result of its world domination addiction due to its leadership, through ever more military interventions, as has been the case since America's emergence, and has led to the partial extermination of the indigenous peoples or Indians in the country of America. But as has so far been the case with criminal world domination interventions in the form of war, etc., has claimed hundreds of thousands and even millions of human lives. Just as it happened last year, when the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on 6th and 9th of August respectively, completely destroying these 2 cities, and America was praised and endorsed by like-minded and completely irresponsible rulers and sections of the population in other states. This was done by inhuman and degenerate elements who in no way deserve to be called human beings. Through this monstrous crime of dropping the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which claimed hundreds of thousands of human lives, not only were human lives murdered, but it also caused a great many wounded and sick people who were irradiated by the atomic fallout and who will die in agony as a result of the radiation, as well as many others who will still have a painful and agonizing existence. In this respect alone, America is a disgrace for the whole nation and for all of humanity. Now, therefore, new atomic bomb tests will be carried out by America, and this as early as the coming month of July on the Bikini Atoll, and these criminal tests will also be followed by further atomic tests by various other states in the coming decades, with the result that the Earth and its humanity will in future live in fear on a dangerous planet equipped with atomic bombs, with the threat of a nuclear war. From my foresight, which I have carried out until the year 2020, I know that from 8 countries, through their irresponsible and power-hungry rulers, their advisors, other rulers, researchers and scientists, more than 2,000 further nuclear bomb tests will be ordered and carried out between the very first and criminal nuclear test by America and the year 2020, some of which I will observe with you. Overall, these tests will also have an extremely adverse and destructive effect on the entire planet and all of nature and its fauna and flora. Person, as well as on the climate and the atmosphere, and indeed on the internal structures of the Earth, which will also lead to many lasting and adverse effects of Earth's tectonics for many decades and far into the next millennia, and thus to many severe earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The following atomic tests will also cause such damage and adverse changes to all structures of nature and the climate that everything will spiral out of control and cannot be regenerated, and consequently the damage will have an impact far into the following millennia. But everything will get even worse, because the lust for power of the irresponsible state leaders, their advisors, supporters, followers, other power-hungry people, the military and scientists, as well as the religious and sectarian majority of the believing, all-supporting populations, will henceforth know no bounds in any respect. In the coming decades, decay and depravity will arise everywhere and in every way of life, of behavior, of desires and longings, of conduct, of learning and knowledge, of hard work, as well as in every way of decent life, like commercially permitted prostitution. Thus, many degenerations will become the absolute and dangerous order of the day, as will be demanded and developed by the further development of technology for war, etc., more deadly and often uncontrollably destructive bombs and intelligent weapon systems, as well as missiles, guided weapons, and all kinds of other weapons. Thus, particularly through the research and power mania of human beings, new bombs, missiles, homing missiles and other weapons of mass destruction are being created that bring new misery, death, destruction, annihilation, and the greatest possible destruction, as well as many other dangerous and deadly weapon systems of a technical and chemical nature that will bring destruction and ruin. Inventive human beings who are also mentally prepared for destruction and murder are also influenced by delusions of fear, because they expect imaginary aggression and attacks as a result of stupid, cowardly, and morbid enemy attacks. This will lead to a senseless, lowly intelligent, and irresponsible, incalculable armament with nuclear fission weapons or nuclear weapons of all kinds among the hostile nuclear powers, and thus to the danger of a nuclear war that could destroy all life on Earth and turn the planet into a dead desert. The majority of all present and future state authorities, other state powers of all kinds and states, their advisors, irresponsible proponents from the nations and the other powerful people, the military and scientists who play with fire in this regard, are so irresponsible, careless, thoughtless, unscrupulous, indifferent, irresponsible, reckless, and also lowly intelligent, and full of fear and cowardice, that they are absolutely unpredictable and will continue to be so for a very long time in the distant future. This is because only a few righteous and responsible people are elected into the state leadership and thus gain access to the affairs of government. Often the unrighteous in their own wise proclaim themselves as dictators and tyrannize the people. Therefore, America and other states will order and advocate new nuclear tests and demand even more devastating nuclear bombs with an enormous potential for destruction than the so-called implosion bombs or uranium bombs have at present. Consequently, the next crime will not be long in emerging from atomic technology, even if it will take a long time before it happens, if no reason and responsibility can be grasped by Earth humans. Then it will be a much stronger hydrogen bomb, which is 1,000 times superior to the uranium bomb, which will be created, after which even worse things are planned. So there will be more nuclear weapons and even worse ones, as well as many other forms of deadly and destructive weapons of annihilation that will already be developed in the coming decades and also in the new millennium, for example so-called fusion bombs and neutron bombs, as well as other neutron weapons, etc., but also unmanned flying objects that will be remotely controlled and will bring death and destruction over long distances. This, as in the new millennium, there will no longer be hand-to-hand fighting, but the new type of warfare will be devious and long-range. And in the new era, women will also learn the trade of war and interfere in wars by fighting, and consequently what was already the custom of the Amazon people a very long time ago will be repeated. All coming wars on Earth will cause the flight of many millions of human beings, as was already the case last year during and after the World War, with numerous waves of refugees from various states. For it will be the case that many more wars will follow, and human beings will flee from the war zones well into the distant future of the next millennium. America will often be the main party involved, openly or secretly in the background, or the instigating cause, or even the direct originator of the wars that will be unleashed in many places in the coming decades. This will also be the case. For example, only 2 decades after the beginning of the new millennium, because America wants to relocate its killer organization, which will be founded by America in about 2 years, to the east, despite earlier promises that this would not be done. As a result of the breach of promise to the Soviet Union, Russia will subsequently invade the country in a warlike manner in order to demand the right to which it is entitled in this wrong way. However, America's call to many other states to support the country under military attack by Russia with financial and military aid, etc., will result in around 50 states complying with America's devious request. Consequently, the war will last a long time, causing many deaths and widespread destruction. And the time of the atomic event on the Bikini Atoll will be the actual point of origin of the future worldwide waves of refugees, which, for many reasons such as drought, hunger, poverty, wars, distress, misery, unemployment and terror, etc., will continue well into the 3rd millennium and will ultimately affect 250,000 to 350,000 human beings. And that in this respect, all the industrialized countries of the North will be flooded with refugees from so-called underdeveloped countries. As I already mentioned, this will be due to a leader in Germany who thoughtlessly proclaimed a culture of welcome, and the people will call the whole thing that in many cases. War-free, politically, socially and economically well-positioned states will be overrun with refugees in the coming times, and especially in the next millennium, particularly throughout Europe and the American continent. But I have already explained this to you several times over the last 2 years, as well as the fact that in the future we will have to reckon with undeniable and unquestionable poor, sometimes also life-threatened refugees from all economically underdeveloped countries, as well as with simple, so-called economic refugees or also work-shy people. There will also be many fraudsters, criminals, gangsters, murderers, capital all kinds of serious offenders and other, as well as all kinds of evildoers, small-time criminals and terrorists, who will of course not be recognized by the authorities, border officials, police, and other security organs of the countries of refuge, let in and then recognized as refugees in need of help. And the number of these refugees of various kinds will increase steadily from year to year from the present time onwards, after the leaders of Germany in the next millennium, however, very quickly expand the entire world refugee problem to such an extent, particularly in all the states of Europe, which, apart from Switzerland, will be a union dictatorship at that time, that the states will then hardly be able to get the refugee problem under control. These will namely invade Europe en masse in the new millennium, smuggled in by criminal gangs who will bring the refugees into the well-off and rich economic states for a fee. Quite a few of the refugees will die during their escape, starve to death, die from exhaustion or disease, drown during ship voyages if they go overboard, capsize and cannot swim. As a result of the poverty and misery in Africa, war and terrorism in Asia or in the Middle East and the Orient, large waves of refugees will indeed come to Europe, whether they are refugees threatened by violence or seeking work, or whether they are also many terrorists, the work-shy and criminals, or just elements seeking prosperity who will make all of Europe unsafe and overrun it. And the real origin of these coming floods of refugees and all the steadily increasing mass migrations will be, on the one hand, the inexorably growing mass of the world's population, as well as unemployment and the terrible uprisings, lack of livelihood, as well as hunger, disease, war, xenophobia and racial hatred, but also religious hatred, terrorism, persecution, rampant spreading diseases, and precarious water shortages, as well as many other factors that will lead to unsolvable problems in the refugees' home countries. On the other hand, America's desire for world power will also contribute to this, through which serious criminal, religious, sectarian, political and dictatorial, secret service, military and economic interventions in the various structures of Asian and African countries, as well as in the Eastern and Arab, Oriental and poor African states, and that an enormous amount of disaster, suffering, need, misery, unrest, and terrorism will be created as a result. As a result, a great many human beings will turn into enemies in the future, and more will become incapable of living and indifferent in every bad wise, which also gives rise to work-shy people, cheats and thieves, but also to many criminals who become burglars, murderers, and robbers. Others, as in the past, will be consumed by boundless hatred for acquaintances, friends, and even members of their own family, as well as neighbors, people of different faiths, and foreign and other nations. The traditional racial hatred against the Jews, which was built up to such an extent in the Nazi Reich, will continue in an expanding wise and will extend far into the next millennium, because in the state of Israel, which will soon be established, a crazed mass murderer will incite the Israeli military to attack the Arabs with the aim of exterminating them as far as possible, or completely by means of a genocide of his own devising. As a result, new racial manias and Jew haters will emerge worldwide, which are not only traditionally based in Islam, but also in the most diverse forms in Christianity, whereby many innocent human beings were already murdered in ancient times and will also be murdered again. In the coming decades and also well into the next millennium, many human beings will become degenerate, blindly fanatical believers and devotees of religions and sects, and bloodthirsty, dehumanized, and also murderous family honor fanatics, as well as murder-mad believers of globally active religious and sectarian evil fanatics of unscrupulous terrorist organizations. And from these, many murderers will emerge, especially from the still distant but coming 1990s and well into the third millennium. These will then emerge as individual perpetrators or in groups and as assassinations, murders and suicide bombings, in the course of which, in various ways, innocent bystanders, such as women, children, adolescents and men of all ages, will be murdered on a massive scale, and in each case often resulting in a massacre. In this wise, terrorism will spread worldwide and bring about a great many deaths among uninvolved and innocent human beings, which is, although it will briefly affect many of earthly humanity in their thoughts and feelings, will not really make them think, as has always been the case, and will continue to be so. Even the most horrific, murderous and catastrophic events and incidents touch, move and stir human beings in their thoughts and feelings as they have done since time immemorial, but only for a short time, if at all, after which everything is quickly forgotten again, without any real, profound and events touch, seize and stir people in their thoughts and feelings as they have done for many years, only for a short time, if at all, after which everything will be quickly forgotten again. Profound, the majority of the people only hypocritically do something against all the evils with empty and powerless words, because it does not affect the big talkers themselves, but foreigners to whom they have no personal relationship. And all this also refers to the fact that Earth humans live indifferently from day to day, and do not seriously reflect on life, existence and all events, everything that exists, as well as all the important things in life. On the other hand, it also refers to the fact that in the coming times, well into the third millennium, as a result of the rapid passing away and fading of thoughts and feelings, as well as the indifference and lack of relationship between human beings, and also with regard to the worst events and evil facts, such as catastrophic human degenerations, deadly and destructive events, degenerate machinations, and as a result of the sheer mass of overpopulation, which is growing irresponsibly, ever worse consequences will arise. And due to the inexorably increasing mass of Earth humans, very malignant, dramatic and mutating changes will increasingly and constantly arise in the future, such as deadly events and evil destructive factors on the planet, because the planet will be criminally damaged and destroyed beyond measure in terms of excessive exploitation of resources. This, as well as the seas and all mainland waters being damaged in their life forms, such as through predatory processes, being wiped out. But how all this will also result on the land, as well as on nature and countless plant life forms. Because Earth humans will in future completely lose the just, good and correct way of life, and with it also the goal of life and all responsibility towards everything and everyone. But not only in this respect will enormous damage occur in the future, but the human being himself will be affected to such an extent that his health will be impaired and all his many bad habits will have a pathogenic effect, will degenerate into harmfulness and lead to many and varied deaths in the future. In the future, the irresponsible behavior of poison-producing companies will also contribute to this, because the use of poisons will begin to flourish worldwide with agriculture and horticulture, as well as governments and authorities being at the forefront of buying up the myriad poisons and spreading them on fields, gardens and streets, thereby poisoning the entire soil. The atmosphere will also be poisoned, which in turn will affect the climate, and the resulting effects will contribute to the fact that all the irresponsible machinations resulting from the irresponsibly increasing mass of overpopulation will increasingly affect the climate, thereby causing catastrophic changes and destroying much. And with all of the fauna and flora with the planet itself, as well as with regard to all of the things of life and the existence of all of the important things. It turns out that ultimately the destructive effects in every respect can no longer be controlled, reversed, or stopped, and that the entire earthly existence is thereby called into question. And if humanity on Earth is not persuaded to stop the growth of overpopulation, which is degenerating in every way, in order to avoid further disaster and reduce the existing one, then the final catastrophe of doom will be unavoidable. In addition to the evil of an uncontrolled increase in the human race, there will be a worldwide black market in the near future for a wide variety of addictive drugs that are constantly being invented. Emerging and beginning will be very fast the unstoppable drug addiction, Tim. Because many mostly young Earth humans will become addicted to various drugs and thus fall into drug addiction and become humanly depraved, and many will die in a miserable wise. The emergence of drug production and criminal drug trafficking will result in completely new areas of crime and criminality. And, as I said, a new form of misery will arise that can no longer be stopped very quickly. Many catastrophic events of all kinds will also occur, such as revenge killings by individuals, jealousy killings, robbery killings, hate killings, mass murders, religious killings, sect killings and feud killings, honor killings and murders by terrorist groups, or murders committed by human beings suffering from depression, jealousy, hate, criminality, mental or psychological illnesses. But then also, many rulers and other responsible persons of various states will be affected and murdered despite security protection, as well as single human being who, for whatever reason, is simply hated and murdered. But the majority of humanity will, as it has done since time immemorial, only express dishonest, unconnected and hypocritical condolences and other grand words when individual human beings or entire groups carry out acts of murder or spread suffering and misery. It will not matter whether the acts are carried out by perpetrators who are depressed or otherwise mentally ill or damaged, confused, stressed by hatred, religiously obsessed, or by terrorists, racists, or, because as a rule, as has always been the case, the condolences and sympathies of the majority of the people, the believers and the rulers, as well as other responsible parties, will only be lies, deception, and appearances of sincerity and honest sympathy. So the appearance and presence of the rulers, the powerful and the responsible at the scene of a terrible event, will only be of use to them and to maintain their office, just as their words and promises will only be deception, cunning, lies, deception, and empty words for those affected by the suffering, as has been the case since time immemorial. And as the majority of the powerful and all the other responsible people, as well as many of the majority of human beings in the population, make only empty promises and speak in a lowly intelligent manner when it comes to the many incidents and murders that occur at the hands of individual perpetrators or groups of a terrorist nature. This will also be the case in many other respects in the future. Likewise, it will come to pass in the coming decades and well into the new millennium, when the already looming natural disasters of today, such as severe storms, floods, earthquakes, and terrible volcanic eruptions, will occur, the origin of which will be traced back to the environmental degradation, destruction of the planet, and climate-destroying machinations of the masses of overpopulation. All the machinations of Earth humans that destroy the planet, nature, its fauna and flora, the atmosphere and the climate will be irreparable. Future natural disasters will claim countless human lives, cause immense destruction and suffering, and ultimately lead to such widespread hardship, misery, disease, rampant spreading diseases, lack of space, food shortages, and water shortages for the entire Earth and humanity that nothing can be done to stop them. And it even comes to the point that worldwide, in many places, such tremendous and primeval storms cause very severe destruction and flooding, as these will be provoked and arrogantly carried out by the all-destroying machinations of Earth humans on the planet and nature in the coming times of the future. The planet Earth, its nature and its fauna and flora will be so badly treated in the future by the evil, countless, destructive and devastating machinations of Earth humans in so many irresponsible ways that many destructions and exterminations will be caused in nature worldwide every day, and will take place endlessly. This is in relation to living creatures, which are animals, creatures, and other life forms that run, swim, fly, slither, or crawl, etc., as well as everything in relation to the world of plants, from the simplest moss to the largest tree. The whole thing, therefore, leads to the far-reaching destruction and annihilation of nature and its fauna and flora, but also to the complete exploitation of the planet in terms of its substances and all its raw materials, especially petroleum, metals, and gases. And when this time comes, which Earth humanity has been heading towards for some time and is now approaching very quickly, if earthly humanity does not return to the path of common sense and reason in the foreseeable and useful future, then there can be no more help. This also means that if the growth of the mass overpopulation is not stopped and not rigorously reduced by birth control and brought to a normal and planet-friendly level for planet Earth of only 500 million in the foreseeable future, and if a worldwide state of peace, extensive freedom and complete security for the planet and its nature as well as for all life is created and develops, then it will come, as in earlier times, that irrevocably an end of any currently still existing high culture will come, and earthly humanity will inevitably disappear. 251. It will take some time until then, but the doom will be inevitable if the masses of overpopulation are not kept down, and everything else that sustains life and all existence. All of earthly life, the functioning of the planet and all living things, as well as nature and its fauna and flora, is protected from all dangers and all degenerating machinations are stopped. Unfortunately, however, this will not be the case in the coming decades and also well into the next millennium, and that is also the case even if you write your letters, and Father Zimmerman and Teacher Count reprint my predictions in 1,000 Ys and send them to all governments, media, authorities, important organizations, to Rome the Pope, to all well-known heads of all religions and sects, etc.
Note: Pastor Emanuel Zimmerman and teacher Karl Graf supported Edward by correcting the entire prediction of Sfath, which Edward had written down, and then copied it around 6,000 times using the transfer printing method. They sent the copies, with the sender being marked as Father Zimmerman, to all governments and newspapers in our world, but without any response, because Father Zimmerman did not receive a single reply to the laborious and costly action, which the two supporters of Edward had shelled out of their own pockets.
But if you do your work, humans and groups will gradually come together, as they will also gather around you when you start to work yourself. Earth humans will probably form groups and learn the teaching of life worldwide, follow it and strive to live and learn. Begin to spread the teaching, from which hope will arise that in 800 to 900 years, very many human beings will slowly begin to make an effort to use their minds and reason consciously, and turn to the teaching that you will henceforth write down. Distribute and teach to the human beings of Earth on a large scale in 30 years. But you should know that this will be an exceptionally difficult and very challenging task and work, and that you will soon be denied and badly harmed as a result of sectarianism, with the authorities and civil servants of various colors also playing a part. You were born into a world in which, even now, human beings are very hostile towards you and harm you because of your mission, and many more will come and treat you very maliciously. And if you have to fulfill your mission in this world, because in it human beings are misled by religions and sects, are unfree, enslaved and oppressed, but also because of their know-it-all attitude, their habits, their self-importance, their vices and addictions, as well as the vanity, megalomania, and delusions of religions and sects, but also in many other respects, then it will still be the case that you will be targeted for life. And as it has been on Earth with regard to human beings in this respect so far, it will also be in the future, and to an ever-increasing extent, because as a result of the inexorably increasing overpopulation, which will result in over 10 billion in the new millennium, It now follows in the coming decades into the third millennium thousand, as far into the third millennium as this one. More and more human beings will succumb to alcohol and drug addiction and jealousy, greed, violence, crime and criminality, child sexual abuse, war, child abuse, violence against women and rape. And there will also be all kinds of unrighteousness in general, such as state-sanctioned and taxed prostitution in the future, with each of these Ausartungen becoming major problems. In the future, more and more confused consciousnesses will also appear, as well as human beings with mental illnesses who will suffer from severe depression and many other illnesses of a damaged consciousness and a damaged psyche. The origins of this will be found in the manifold effects and things of the mass of excessive overpopulation, such as in a fanatically degenerating political, religious and sectarian delusion, whereby in religious and sectarian superstition, delusion in fantasies, illusions, unreality, hallucinations, delusional visions, wishful thinking, mirages and suggested crazy and confused inspirations of unscrupulous seducers will be believed, causing reality to be misjudged and even denied. The rapidly increasing mass of overpopulation will also have a lasting and very adverse and evil effect on the morals and behavior, illnesses and suffering of Earth humans, as will be seen, for example, in anancastic neuroses, compulsions, morbid passions, as well as manias, excessive desires, wishes and addictions, which will also include frenzy, raving madness, madness and foolhardiness, rage, violence and obsessive-compulsive disorders, obsessive-compulsive neuroses and obsessive-compulsive disorders, etc., and the rapidly increasing mass of overpopulation will bring with it a general softening of thoughts, feelings and the psyche of the body, as well as an instability of life, that even small tensions and efforts will lead to hot flushes, fever, delusion, heart failure, and a total breakdown. But this will also result in strange delusions, delusional phenomena, fantasies, unrealities and dizziness, as has happened many times before. The delusions of individual or few human beings appear to such an extent for these themselves and for strictly believing fellow human beings in delusional form and remain visible in a delusional manner for many decades and even centuries. Exactly as we observed the woman Bernadette Subaru together on our journey into the past in February 1858, and also twice on the following days in Lourdes, who was somehow hysterical and claimed to have seen an apparition of Mary, which we two non-believers logically could not see, because the whole thing of the hysterical believers, namely Bernadette Subarus, was just a delusion. In the coming decades and well into the next millennium, countless human beings will succumb to pathological thoughts, feelings and thus confusions of consciousness and severe mental disorders as a result of religious or sectarian delusions. These will result in the future in a reduction in self-control and quality of life, and specifically in a weakening of the will to live that will inevitably arise from the delusion. This will lead to the faithful being defrauded of their faith and financially exploited by the powerful in religion and sect through public electrophonic information media, just as various states will also financially harm the faithful through unjust religious taxes. Lack of interest in life, lack of courage and weariness of life will also spread widely and lead to many suicides. Also, a widespread lack of interest and indifference regarding one's own development of consciousness, personal values and well-being, as well as education, self-knowledge and self-esteem, will be the order of the day, especially for many younger people. And what applies to indifference towards one's own person will also be transferred to fellow human beings, and increasingly prevent connecting relationships between people and ultimately dissolve them. This will not only lead to a lack of relationships in society, but also in families, acquaintances, friendships, and partnerships, causing human beings to become foreign, meaningless, and indifferent to each other, and consequently to go their own ways. In the future, however, it will also be the case that many human beings will fall prey to a lack of self-control and atrophy of mind and reason. And this will be due to a degenerative and completely destructive change in the ability to grasp and understand, as well as the atrophy of the very important ability of consciousness to process. And this will already become apparent in the course of the next few decades, which will be particularly evident in young and younger human beings in terms of their negative lifestyle and the pathological regression of their ability to learn. The increasingly widespread incorrect education of offspring by parents in the future, as well as the education and interests and learning ability of children in relation to their offspring, will, on the one hand, make them effeminate and degenerate, while on the other hand, they will become weak in mind and reason, which will be deposited in the genes and in turn be inherited by further offspring to their descendants. As a result of the growth of the masses, overpopulation, the minds and reason of the descendants will become weaker and weaker, mutating, which will lead to the emergence of an increasingly chaotic mind-reason control, which will also be expressed in all relationships in a way that is detrimental to life. 270. Incorrect education. Now, in 1946, not only promotes general effeminacy and a decline in rational thinking in the offspring, but also a failure of the ability to reason, as well as a low level of intellectual development and physical impairments of various kinds. And the fact is that these adverse changes are being inexorably inherited due to the rapidly increasing overpopulation, and the majority of humanity is increasingly wasting away in terms of mind and reason, albeit very slowly but inexorably, which will have very serious consequences for the future. And this leads to the further consequence, as it has done since time immemorial, that only human beings who are largely in control of their minds and reason can assert themselves and rise to positions of government power and similar and parallel offices and positions, and can assert themselves among the majority of peoples because they are not fully capable of reason and understanding and are therefore lowly intelligent, which means that they are not capable of independent thought but only of devout belief. The majority of power-hungry people, who of course get into government through lies and deception, as well as through the low intelligence of the majority of the people, who think in terms of appearances, with just a few exceptions who are of firm character, enrudi, have integrity, are trustworthy and capable of reason and reason, can use and exploit the majority of the less intelligent and reasonable people in a suggestive and rhetorical way to draw them to their side and bring themselves to power. But it is also undoubtedly the case, as I have found, that among those in government there are also human beings who are without reason and weak in understanding, who only make it into governments, offices, and high responsibility positions through connections, falsehood, violence, lies and deception, hypocrisy, ruthlessness, and persuasion. But what the future will bring, in terms of the behavior of many Earth dwellers, is the fact that in the future many human beings will fall prey to nefarious indecencies and vices. As a result, crime and criminality will increase worldwide in the future, and these can no longer be controlled by the state security forces, and the courts will also be hard-pressed to deal with the constantly increasing number of criminal proceedings involving human beings who are dissolute, immoral, indecent, depraved, and eerie, disreputable, wretched, bad, vulgar and depraved, as well as criminal or criminal, etc. Reality and truth are no longer perceived as they should and would need to be, with the result that human beings also become increasingly confused in their thinking and create false role models, ideals, guiding principles, utopias, thoughts, and whereby they become incapable of initiative and self-decision, but live and act in a worldly, religious, or sectarian way according to what they are told and whispered to them. As a result, it will also become unrecognizable for science, because in the future it will not deal with this topic and, therefore will not recognize it, that Earth humans are no longer capable of initiative with regard to developing a personal view and opinion, attitude, stance, and original personal thoughts, but are only controlled by matters of faith. As a result, they will increasingly become fanatical and zealous, pathologically clinging to things, actions and deeds of other people, which will lead to them no longer being able to recognize in their delusional behavior that they no longer decide on everything and anything themselves, but are controlled by external forces in this regard. In this wise, wildly effective unrealities of all kinds arise in human beings, which degenerate into a lack of meaning in life and no longer allow valuable and educational thoughts, feelings, and no longer allow one's own achievements and views, etc., whereby only the achievements, actions, opinions, and deeds of other people are recognized, reproduced, and brought to bear. Also, unrealistic esoteric groups and organizations, religions, sects and philosophies, etc., will increasingly dominate the faithful in the future and keep them away from reality and truth, as they have done since time immemorial, and lead them astray. And, in the future, more and more delusions will appear in many human beings, as it was already the case for 300 years from the 15th century, when the spirit mania and witchcraft mania, as well as demon belief and the belief in other supernatural might, raged among the majority of Earth humans of the most diverse peoples.
I know that at that time particular characteristics were considered to be a witch or a devil worshipper, and to be denounced and murdered. Particular eye colors, such as light blue eyes in dark-skinned human beings, but also red hair or freckles, birthmarks, warts, a third nipple, etc., were enough, and even owning a black cat was reason enough to denounce a woman as a witch. The belief in witches is ancient, and the idea that women were in league with the devil and could use their magic to cause harm corresponds to religious myths without equal. Nevertheless, from the 15th century onwards, real witch hunts began, in which tens of thousands of human beings, mostly women, but also occasionally men, were murdered, often after being tortured. They died on the gallows, by being broken on the wheel, drowned, quartered, or burned at the stake, etc. And this witchcraft mania still exists today, as do the belief in devils and ghosts, etc., which will continue to wreak havoc for a long time into the future, especially in underdeveloped countries where belief in ghosts still exists and is common practice, along with the belief in demons, in good and evil spirits, and in the appearance of Mary, etc.
Yes, that was the case, is the case, and will also continue in the future. In the future, religious and sect-promoted delusions of all kinds will increase again worldwide and cause human beings to fall prey to nonsensical hallucinations as they increasingly indulge in delusions. Illusions, lies of faith, false pretenses, deception, and unreality. Religious and sectarian superstition, delusion and belief in spirits. Sect-related clairvoyance, religious messianism, and religious miracle working will reach new heights in the future, as will fear of spirits, mysticism, belief in miracles and delusions. The belief in demons, on the other hand, is flattened and will not play a very important role in the future. All evils and everything religious and sectarian will be controlled in the coming period by the lies and deception of religions and sects and their fanatical and power-obsessed advocates in such an irresponsible way that their many believers will gather to in terrorist organizations in the name of an alleged creator god, to seduce many into torture, violence, war, murder, rape and destruction, to torture and kill innocent human beings as holy warriors and thereby enter paradise to their alleged god. In this wise it will be and come about that in the coming decades and well into the next millennium, such events will be prepared and later carried out, consequently bringing war, murder, death, destruction, and devastation, suffering, misery, sorrow, and hardship, as well as all kinds of other evils upon the whole world and its humanity. So in the future, missaid human beings will increasingly appear, who, as sect-controlled and terrorist, radicalized and delusional individuals, will bring murderous disaster, suffering, misery, hardship, and sorrow to people all over the world. And they will do this as individuals or in groups and terrorist organizations, as fanatical holy warriors and avengers, murdering countless innocent human beings, causing great destruction and also irretrievably destroying very old cultural artifacts, against which the whole of Earth humanity will be helpless and powerless. In the future, however, there will also be more and more mothers who will murder their newborns, as well as their older children. This, as mothers and fathers will also increasingly sexually abuse their daughters and sons, as rape by women as well as by men will increase, whereby foreign children of both sexes will also fall prey to sexual abuse and women to forced prostitution and even sex slavery. This will happen while other women and also men will increasingly commit more and more criminal and serious criminal acts, which often end fatally. And when such acts do happen, then, as a result of a worrying humanistic effeminacy, ever worse and more reprehensible acts are committed against the body, life and good of human beings, and deeds are carried out for which, however, the perpetrators are held to account for far too lightly in the name of misunderstood humanity, and are thereby encouraged to continue in their actions and deeds. In the coming decades, a law enacted by the authorities will also officially legalize murder for human beings who are willing to die, which will be called suicide and will cause so-called suicide tourism, although suicide will be murder because helpers will administer poisons to those willing to die, which they will take themselves. However, because the administration of the poison is carried out by third parties, this means aiding and abetting murder, which must be punishable by law. However, this goes against every law of protecting life and should therefore be punished, but it will wrongly be disregarded. In this wise, those who are willing to die will not leave life through suicide, but will be murdered by the law, which takes no responsibility for life. And for this purpose, people willing to commit suicide will also be allowed to enter Switzerland from foreign countries, where the legalized, dishonorable, undignified and systematic suicide murder will very quickly be called suicide tourism. In the near future, legally permissible practices involving narcotics will be carried out by completely irresponsible homicidal maniacs in Switzerland, as they were also practiced by the National Socialists in the Nazi Reich, and this kind of murder-suicide will be legally permitted. Everything that has been presented, explained and said so far corresponds to predictions that are related to many upcoming events and incidents of the next decades, as well as the times of the next millennium, as I have seen them in the future and now made them accessible to you, as I will let you see many more things through future travels, as well as many more things through past travels, as you already know them. Everything I say, as well as everything you say yourself, is extensively recorded and stored by a very sophisticated phonographic apparatus, so that it will never be lost, and consequently everything will be retrievable again, even after a very long time. This will also be the case when you do it in the future, when you return to Switzerland in 22 years after your adventurous and busy stay in many countries, and begin and carry out your mission. However, it will be necessary for you and your task and mission that I explain many more predictive facts to you and let you see many events of the past and the future in those times through direct vision, but which must not be repeated by you and therefore must not be mentioned openly. 92. Consequently, you may also not write down many things for memory, but only those facts, explanations and predictions that I give you for your work of writing, which you are to write from the 1950s and send to all governments of the world and to many well-known public media, as well as journals, radio stations and newspaper editorial offices, but also to various well-known organizations, for which, as I have already explained, Pastor Zimmerman and Teacher Graf will be of great help to you. Only in the more distant future will you be allowed to speak openly about the contents of our conversations when you are required to do so, which you will actually do, as I have seen through my looking at you in future times. That should be enough explained and said for today in relation to what I dictated to you, and you also had to write down so that your teacher, Count, could correct it and then reprint it together with Pastor Zimmerman and send it around the world in 1,000 whys.